Thanks so much, Janice and Claudia, for putting this together and for inviting me. This is wonderful.
Sorry, pull the mic up.
Say again? Closer?
Yeah, please.
Okay, sure. Is it better?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was just thanking Janice and Claudia, and this is wonderful for me because it brings two lines of work that I'm really, really fascinated by together, which is political subjectivity and hauntology, which is what's in the air here. So let me just jump right in. What makes the subject political? In my earlier work, I have proposed that political subjectivity is a manifestation of the entanglement of subjective experience with symbolic orders of power and meaning, not as an epiphenomenon, but as a condition of being a subject as such. Political subjectivity is not reducible to ideology, politics, technology, or even psychology. It is a semiotic formation through which the subject is forged inside culturally mediated systems of power. Today, I'd like to extend that framework by integrating what I have elsewhere addressed as a hauntology of everyday life, which is to say an understanding of the notion of hauntology that foregrounds both the structuring presence of power and the formative absence at its core. Haunting, in this sense, is not simply the return of the past, but the persistent trace of what structure excludes. The erased, the silenced, the foreclosed, the leftover. It points at both the past and the future. My argument is that these absences are not accidental. They are structural effects of overriding and erasure. Here I will focus on the historical and the political expression of the idea, which takes place not only at the point where a system of power and order takes shape, as laid out, for instance, in Derrida's essay, Force of Law, but also when one system of power or regime of meaning, etc., displaces another through such acts as colonization, genocides, revolution, or forms of epistemic violence. So, political subjectivity emerges A, within the structures of power and meaning, and B, through recursive attunement to lack. This is the hauntological aspect, lack. The subject is not only positioned in the system of power and meaning, but it's also motivated and oriented. It is drawn toward or around absence, that which is erased, or in relation to the absence, I should say. Janice Jenkins' articulation of political subjectivity as formed at the nexus of orientation and atmosphere offers a wonderful phenomenological interpretation here, where Jenkins highlights the affective immediacy of political life or how it feels to live within power-saturated atmosphere. I suggest that this feeling can be understood as the phenomenological registration of haunting. The orientedness of the political subject in this sense is not just affective or cognitive, it is an effect of the economy of desire that motivates the subject's navigation through a given symbolic and political space. Okay, let's connect these ideas to real life. I know you asked me to do that, and I'm going to do that. Through the case of Andres. This is a pseudonym. Andres is a Spanish man in his mid-30s who has lived between Spain and the United States for much of his adult life. He is bright, driven, and socially perceptive, but he has come to me for therapy because he struggles to sustain academic and institutional stability, repeatedly derailed by visa complications, missed deadlines, and inconsistent attendance that have led to academic failures and periodic expulsions from programs on which, by the way, his residence status directly depends. His family background is marked by a conspicuous silence around politically charged history. His great-grandfather fought in Spain's colonial wars in the Sahara, and later supported Franco's regime. And thanks to that, subsequent generations prospered through business ventures, connections, and local and international access linked to the regime, including deep investments in Latin America tied to extractive and politically fraught industries of the post-war era. These histories were never discussed openly at home in terms other than business, and in sessions too, they were just recounted as either current business matters or as interesting but irrelevant relics. Yet they lingered as a moral undercurrent in the family, in his dreams, and more subtly in our sessions. Andres's relationships with his parents, his siblings, with academic, social, and political institutions are consistently volatile, marked by cycles of active or passive anger and dysregulated abandon, followed by regret, remorse, and an active wish and effort towards repair. He speaks of feeling perpetually on the brink, and he lives in a space permeated by a guilt he cannot locate or name, a rebellion he cannot own or identify, and dreams in which he is both the accuser and the defender. In Andres, I argue, we see a subject who is not just interpellated, never know how to pronounce this word, but also haunted by the voices he cannot name, by a justice he cannot locate, and by the structures of power that he cannot escape or rebel against without also destroying himself, or at least a version of himself. Let me use 5 quick points to explain. First, transgenerational skeletons and inherited contradictions. Andres's family history is marked by complex legacies of complicity and denial. His grandfather was aligned with Franco's fascist ambitions. His father profited from illicit arms deals and remained economically entangled with regimes of violence well into the 1990s. These histories are not openly discussed in the family. In fact, they are structurally disavowed, but they persist in Andres's psychic life as a felt contradiction, a moral residue without a name. Andres describes a deep sense of unease and guilt that he cannot trace back to any direct action. He often speaks as if he has committed crimes that he cannot recall, or inherited debts that he is not aware of and he cannot repay. This unlocatable guilt does not function as a delusion, but it is the mark of transgenerational haunting, where unprocessed historical complicity becomes an ethical orientation structured by symptomatic pulls, a gravitation towards a justice that has no clear object, and a shame that attaches to absent acts. He is, in this case, a subject formed through encrypted legacies. He is carrying secrets that were never told, yet never fully buried. Second, spectral justice and anger as ethical rebellion. Much of Andres's affective life is shaped by explosive anger towards family, towards partners, and towards institutions. I won't have the luxury of opening this up much here, but his rage is not reactive or narcissistic. It is best understood as a distorted form of moral address. He lashes out not to harm, but to summon accountability from a structure that refuses to name its crimes. Third, recursive failure and the loss of futurity. Andres's life is shaped by patterns of collapse and repetition. He begins projects with intensity only to derail at the moment of institutional consolidation, missed deadlines, visa crises, academic expulsion. His failures are not due to inability, but to an ambivalent refusal, as if institutional success would require complicity with the very structure that he wishes to indict. He perpetually oscillates between productivity and paralysis, and this rhythm is not random. It mirrors his family's cyclical navigation of crisis, a recursive orientation around survival, guilt, set in a history marked by abrupt downturns and rapid recovery. Family history. Here we can see the repetition compulsion, not just as trauma, but as a spectral inheritance. The repeated failure to arrive at a future because that future was always already foreclosed. Fourth, bureaucratic haunting and the ethics of collapse. For Andres, institutions, especially universities and immigration offices, are not neutral bureaucracies. They are haunted structures, ghost-like in their logic, indifferent in their cruelty, yet saturated with a kind of simultaneously ethical and affective demand. He often describes being judged by anonymous systems or being caught in procedural traps in ways that echo historical injustices. His inability to remain enrolled in academic programs, his recurring issues with visa renewal and bureaucratic failure, these are by no means indicators of logistical incompetence. He is very clearly competent. He's very clearly competent and socially quite intelligent. These are in fact reflections of a symbolic revolt against haunted institutions. His rebellion is not against rules per se, but against the ethical emptiness of systems that erase responsibility. Fifth, dream work and the spectral language of his unconscious, I should say. Andres's dreams are filled with violent reversals, collapsed buildings, familial monsters, and trials in which he must defend himself or others from accusations that are never clearly named. These dreams are not simply psychological residues of his daily life or his life. They are spectral texts that are registering encrypted histories and repressed judgments. In one of his recurring dreams, Andres is called to testify in a crumbling court while surrounded by his family members, both living and dead. He does not know the charge, but he feels certain that someone must be held accountable and that he is both the accuser and the accused. These dreams generally operate in a pantemporal register, where past, present, and future collapse into a single haunted moment. They are not about memory or anticipation, they are about an orientation, a disorienting orientation, if you wish, toward a justice that has no arrival point, a justice that is structurally foreclosed. So, to come back then to the hauntology of the political subject. What Andres's case highlights is that political subjectivity cannot be fully grasped through models of interpellation, identity, or experience alone. His psychic life is shaped not just by the structures that he inhabits, but also by the absence that those structures have created. The secrets they conceal, the histories they disavow, and the futures they foreclose. His emotional volatility, his academic derailments, or his institutional breakdowns are not simply personal failures or psychological symptoms. As I mentioned earlier, Janice Jenkins has beautifully illustrated how political subjects don't simply occupy positions within structures of power, they inhabit atmospheres that shape how power feels, how it moves through bodies and spaces. What hauntology brings to this picture is perhaps a closer understanding of why atmosphere so often feels charged with spectral currents, and why orientation is so often experienced as disorientation. So if you want to take anything away from this talk, let it be this. Subjectivity is always political subjectivity, since it is structured through systems of meaning, power, and historical mediation. The political subject must also be understood as haunted. Being haunted is not a metaphor here. It is the structural condition of systems that establish their coherence through exclusion and foreclosure. What they're foreclosed does not disappear. It returns as spectral force, and it shapes how subjects orient themselves within the social and affective fields. To take the haunted subject seriously is to examine how political life is shaped by excluded pasts and foreclosed futures, and to ask how the anthropologist or the clinician might learn to understand such subjects or to speak in their name. Thank you.